So today I'm going to talk about label reading. It can be a difficult task, but it also can be broken down into smaller parts to make it a lot more manageable. If you're in the grocery store and you're trying to look at labels and say, is this food healthy for me, or should I stay away from it? What's the deal? So a lot of times, fats, we'll find that as one of the first ingredients on a lot of processed foods, a lot of convenience foods, because what does fat do? It adds flavor, right? It makes things taste good. It also can make the shelf life last longer in foods, all that good stuff. And each gram of fat has about 9 calories. So when you're looking at a label, a lot of times they might say calories from fat. That's how they figure it out. They take the grams and they multiply it by 9. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, have 4 grams of fat. 4 calories per gram. And protein does also as well, has 4 grams. So you want to make sure too, when you're looking at the labels, you want no more than about 30% of your calories to come from fat, and no more than 10% of your calories to come from saturated fat as guidelines. And you'll notice on the bottom of each label, it will give you the recommended daily value based on like a 2,000 calorie diet, and that's just based on like an average adult. Your needs might be higher or lower depending on your activity level, your age, sex as well. So I listed on papers that I handed out in the pink papers just some common examples of fat, what you might see on the label. It doesn't have to come out and say fat. There's a lot of other words that mean that. It could have, nuts. It could say oven fried, baked, toasted. It could say coconut oil, palm oils. It could say, contains the following. So all those things mean that fat has been added to that food. You want to make sure that you're avoiding foods that have things like coconut oil, palm oil, hydrogenated oils, because a lot of times that's going to mean that the food's going to be higher in saturated fat. So we want to avoid those words in the ingredient list. Other things like margarines, that's a big question that people always ask me, well, butter's natural, isn't it healthier than margarine? Well, it is true there are some margarines that aren't healthy for you. A lot of times they'll make them with hydrogenated oils, so they're a lot higher in saturated fats than some butters. Some of the ones that I like to recommend to people are Promise Light is a good one, Brummel & Brown is a good butter, and our margarine, and also Smart Balance Light is also a good one. Ones that you want to stay away from are things like Country Crock. You'll notice like one of the first, that's probably like the popular one.
We all grew up on that.
You'll notice like a lot of the oils, it will say hydrogenated oils. It will have not the oils listed below, like it won't have corn oil, it won't have olive oil, it won't have canola oil in it. So just compare those when you're looking at the label. Yep.
Why is it good to avoid the saturated fats and the hydrogenated oils?
Okay. Yeah, because those fats, they tend to increase our bad cholesterol, our LDL cholesterol, and they tend to lower our good cholesterol. So we want to stay away from those. Those are the types of fats that like to harden in our arteries, so that's why we want to stay away from those types of fats. Some claims you might notice, it might say, oh, this food is low in fat. By law, if a food makes that claim, it has to have no more than 3 grams of fat per serving. Obviously, if you're going to eat more than 1 serving, it might not be, a low-fat food anymore. And that's where I think a lot of people get in trouble when they're looking for, healthier foods. They think, oh, I can eat as much as I want because it's low-fat or it's low in calories. But you really have to look at the serving size, because if you're eating more than 1 serving, that health claim might no longer pertain to that food. Something that's low in saturated fat won't have any more than 1 gram per serving. Something that's low in cholesterol, by law, won't have any more than 20 milligrams of cholesterol or no more than 2 grams of saturated fat per serving. Something that's fat-free can't have any more than half a gram of fat per serving, but obviously if you have more, you're going to, it's not going to be fat-free anymore. It's also good to look, too, if something's fat-free and it, originally naturally has fat in it, but what are they doing to replace that flavor that the fat is taken, when it's taken out? A lot of times they'll add sugar, so you really have to look at the calories too. One that I really like to use as an example is, do you guys ever, like Snackwell cookies they have out there, and they're all fat-free, right? Well, if you actually look, comparing like a serving size of Snackwell cookies to Oreos, they have about the same. More sugar, yeah. less fat, but they have about the same amount of calories. So I think people get a false sense of security and they think, oh, well, these cookies are healthy for me. I can have as many as I want, you know, so they eat like a whole, you know, tray of Snackable cookies when actually, you know, you're not really getting a health benefit from it. You're going to have a lot more calories. So it's better just to have maybe 3 Oreos instead of a whole bunch of those Snackable cookies. So always look at the serving size. And I brought a label with me too to kind of show you guys. When you're looking at the label, in the green, you want to make sure that you really keep track of the serving size. The ones that are highlighted in yellow, those are the ones that you want to limit. So if we're looking at fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, and sodium, we all want to keep those lower. When we're looking at the ones in blue, the fiber, all the vitamins, those are the ones that we want to make higher. So when you're looking at the percent daily value, a good guideline is if something's 5%, that means that it's low in that item. So you want to keep the ones in yellow to those low percentages. And if something's 20%, that means it's high in that item. So like sodium, you're trying to limit your sodium in your diet. Instead of counting milligrams and writing things down, it's always good just to look at that 20%. As long as most of the foods you're eating are less than 20%, then you know that you're probably going to be following a low sodium diet instead of having to add everything up, and it gets kind of tedious that way. And that way too, you're not spending forever in the grocery store. You know, you're not there, you know, hemming and hawing over different labels and until they kick you out. A good thing is too, when you go to the grocery store, don't feel that you have to, you know, look at every single label of every single food that you're buying. You know, maybe you just used up, say you usually buy like Ritz crackers, and you know, okay, these aren't probably the healthiest cracker for me. That's what I'm going to focus on my next shopping trip. I'm just going to look at the label of all the crackers, find the one that's healthier for me, and that's going to be kind of my goal this grocery trip. And then the next time you go, you know, pick something else as your goal to look at and to eat something healthier. Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed. You know, if you're constantly looking at every single thing, overanalyzing it, you know, a lot of times it gets us really overwhelmed. So it's really good just to pick one thing, focus on that, and then move on to the next thing. Another item that you'll notice, you know, sugar is also added to many processed foods. A lot of times they can add extra calories, like we were talking about with the cookies. So I've listed some names that you might find sugar under a label. So things like dextrose, molasses, sucrose, fructose, lactose, all those things mean sugar. Some of them are more natural sugars, you know, fructose and lactose. Those are all naturally occurring sugars, so they're a little bit healthier for us. Other ones are added sugars like honey, corn syrup, things like that. Like I said before, sugars offer about 4 calories per gram. So when you're looking at the carbohydrates and you're trying to figure out how they figured out how many calories are coming from carbohydrates, that's what they did. They multiplied the grams times 4. You might notice too, a lot of times things have sugar alcohols in them. Does anyone know what sugar alcohols are? No.
Like sorbitol.
Yep, sorbitol is one of them. And what they are is
If it ends in OL, it's an alcohol.
Exactly. So if it ends in OL, that means it's a sugar alcohol when you're looking at the ingredient list. And what that is a lot of times they add them to like low carb foods because only half of the calories are absorbed from those sugars. So a lot of times you'll find them in like sugar-free candies. So you have to be careful because sometimes they can have a laxative effect if you eat too much of them, because if you're not absorbing them, they're going to be going through you. So it's not one of those things they always say, oh, you can subtract, you know, the grams of sugar alcohols from the total carbohydrates. I say, you know, sugar, add it up as you would any normal sugar. Some other claims you might find are things that might say sodium-free. That means by law that has to have 5 milligrams or less per serving. And we need about 1,000 milligrams of sodium a day to kind of survive, keep our electrolytes in balance. And that's actually equal to about a teaspoon of salt. So it's not really a lot when you think about it. When we're adding on salt to our foods and seasoning them before, you know, maybe you taste them. So it's not really a lot of sodium that we need. Most diets, they recommend about 2,000 milligrams to 2,400. So that kind of gives you an idea of, you know, what your needs are. When we're talking about sugar, I brought my sugar bottles with me. I didn't bring the fat because you guys are eating, so I didn't